Good afternoon. The Arts Council for Monterey County welcomes you to our monthly online segment, Artist Spotlight. I am Karen Lee Garcia, the program's director, and today I'm so pleased to welcome local artist and professor, Dr. Jennifer Colby. Hello, welcome.
Hi. Hi, thanks for having me.
Yes. So Jennifer Colby, PhD, is an artist, scholar, curator, and educator. Dr. Colby received her PhD in humanities from the California Institute of Integral Studies, a master's in studio art from Fresno State University, and a master's of theology, religion, and the arts from the Graduate Theological Union in Berkeley. Her acrylic paintings can be embedded with photographic images and often are part of larger installations about watersheds, icons in the land, or California missions journey. She has a studio in her Aromas home and a teaching studio at the Artworks at Pacific Grove. So welcome again. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm so excited to be talking to you today. And just full disclaimer, it's raining here in Monterey County. So, any technical glitches, we will pop back online, but we love the rain, but our underground wires don't like that. So, but thank you so much for being here. And it's just nice to see you because I haven't seen you. I saw you on Monday, but I haven't seen you since the fall. So it's just nice to be able to connect in this space since we're still under shelter in place. Yeah. So tell me just a little bit more about your background. I know that you owned a gallery space at one point in time, but just anything else you want to share with.
Sure. Yeah, well, thank you for having me. I really appreciate the Arts Council and having my studio at the Artworks since 2017. I previously was in San Juan Bautista. I owned the Galleria Tonantzin, and we were there 21 years and focused on women's art. So today I'm going to share about my own work, which sometimes I'm kind of shy about my own work, but that's what I'm focused on now. After all those years of curating, I curated in a museum in Berkeley as well, and I still think of myself as a curator and like to put exhibitions together. And from this kind of rural area that I live in Aromas, the connection with San Juan Bautista was a really a wonderful opportunity. And some people asked, how did you get to CSUMB? And my answer is, it came to me because I've been here since 1988 in the area and started teaching in CSUMB in 2020. And I'll talk later about how my coursework is about bringing the arts to elementary school through training future teachers, our undergraduates that are really excited about becoming teachers. One of the things you mentioned was my watershed art. For many years, I was working on the Pajaro River and the Gavilan River watershed, and really, again, curating these major exhibits. And in that time period, I was awarded the Champion of the Arts back in 2007. So that also, for me, has always been a great connection with the Arts Council.
No, thank you. And of course, you're an early, an early tenant at Artworks. And just to clarify, you said that you were teaching at CSUMB since 2020, but I think that was way early.
2000. Yeah, 2000.
Okay. Okay.
I think
you've been there a little bit longer. And so there is just a large history of a large just group, of undergraduates that have gone through your, underneath your guidance. So that's great to hear. And it's nice to hear, and we'll probably have an offline conversation about this, that, more that there is a focus on the arts in the teaching profession, that's not being lost. So we appreciate that.
So you wanted me to talk about how I got through COVID. I mean,
Yes, I want, that's what I was
really
just going to move
focus
into.
on that.
So, mhm. So
Yeah.
please tell us.
So yeah, we really are, just sheltered in place. And for my teaching, we went all online. So I was challenged to develop different ways to bring the arts to my students online. The one that's I teach is multiple arts, so music and drama as well as visual art. Dance I found the hardest to do online, but
Mhm.
so I've been really focused on that. And exactly a year ago when COVID shut down our county, shut down our studio for several months, I was getting ready in my mind to be doing a retrospective exhibition. I'd been accepted in the jury for the uh, Pacific Grove Art Center, and I
Right.
was looking forward to November, and then COVID hit, and I kind of, well, at first you didn't know. You just keep doing your artwork, get ready for that, and as the year went by and we were still in this shelter in place, I started to wonder if this show would happen. But fortunately, uh, it happened, and so I'm really excited that I was able to look back at 40 years of work, picking 1980 because that was the year I had a exhibition at uh, what I call College 5, Porter College, UC Santa
Mhm.
Cruz, and that was like my first exhibition as a professional artist. And although I painted murals when I was 16, so I've been an artist my whole life.
So just talking a little bit about that, you probably got the green light at some point that the exhibit was still going to happen. Um, but was there ever, I'm assuming that there was just moments too where you just didn't know, like, is it gonna, are they gonna just pull back, or, is it still going to happen? How was it different? I mean, I know it was probably radically different, but kind of walk us through,
Sure.
because you've been doing this for so long. What were the changes just in terms of setting up the show and all of the, and welcoming in visitors?
Right. Well, we weren't able to do the receptions in the first Fridays, but I did, and I wondered if you're not going to have too many people see it, then it became important to me to document the exhibit, because this this large body of work, getting it up, and there was a big job in itself. But it allowed me to reflect on the work and to document it. And a lot of people did come and had more one-on-one tours rather than a big reception. So that was the
Mhm.
change, really.
Yeah, and I also remember at that time, I think you sent an email out when you were wrapping up the show, and you were saying, can someone help me? Because you had to go up and
Oh,
down the stairs, and it just reminded me of what we already know, that art is just such a community. It just brings a community together, and when we
yeah,
were in shelter in place, it was just so hard to bring the community to even just help, schlepping things up and down the stairs.
right.
It's like I felt so bad at that moment, and it just it's just that one of those moments where I just was reflecting on the importance of community, and what a big huge project this was for you to.
Yeah, it was a big project, but
Yeah, it
I'm
was
glad
a really
it
big
worked
project.
out, because there's uh there's such an opportunity. Uh,
Hmm.
so we could look at some of the work, and
Yeah,
that
so
would give people an idea of what I'm talking about.
absolutely. So I'm going to just share that. Hold just 1 second to our audience. Okay, so you're going to walk us through what we.
Yeah, so just, I've been working with collage for a while, um, embedding it into my acrylic painting. So that's kind of the methodology I use. And this is one from a few years ago, but it has that center in it that I'm going to talk about as we go through.
And what is the name of this piece?
This is Ages with Time.
Okay.
And the next one is about just a close-up of one of the windows. I ended up calling my exhibit Portals. And it's to me, it was significant because over the years, I've been saying doorways, windows. A lot of my paintings are two-sided, and I use this strip painting idea especially in the early ones. And the idea of like sharing a passage through the door or the portal. And it just came as I was reading about, people were talking about the pandemic as a portal.
Mhm.
Dr. Roy was the main person talking about that.
No,
The
I
next one, I
really
think,
fitting. Once we walk, it really does make sense to have
yeah,
that the title.
right. So a lot of, again, that they have, there over the years they have squares, but think of them as portals, or in this one was a series called Icons in the Land.
Mhm.
And this is a shot of the exhibition.
It's so
And
beautiful.
so you get a sense of, I was in the largest room, so you really got the opportunity to bring in a lot of work. And I went from 1980 up to 2020
Mhm.
with different things and stages of my life. And I think just having the opportunity to see it all out there was really important. And I did a lot of reflection. I wanted to see, like, the crowd in there with the wine and the cheese, but with the pandemic, that didn't happen.
Didn't happen. Yeah. Here's a.
So this one is the more recent work that I've been doing since I've been in the artworks. And the orange one is the piece about the pandemic.
Mhm.
And again, I'm still working with the square. Here's this one. This is the pandemic as a portal. And it
Mhm.
just was different ideas that came about. And one of the things I realized was the pandemic for me is a lot about grief. And I know we just might be numb to think that we have 500,000 deaths. And a year ago we had 42, exactly a year ago. So it's
Right.
like, that is a lot of people. And I also experienced at a more personal level, not from COVID, but in 2020, I lost my dad, my mom, and my father-in-law all
Oh
in
my
the
goodness.
same year. So the dripping of the paint started to become maybe an action of my artwork, and creating that was a way of meditating, or what I later came to call lamentations, being that there's ways in which our production of artwork can really help us heal and move through those kinds of moments in our lives.
Mhm.
And then I just wanted to mention that I do these collages thinking about one kind of object. It might be, a lot of it's very feminine because I'm telling women's stories. So we all think of Ruth Bader Ginsburg because of her collars. So this
Mhm.
was a piece I did right at the end, but it illustrates how I can embed the cloth piece into acrylic paint.
That's amazing.
It's a fun
And these
one.
are two separate pieces, correct?
Yeah, it's two pieces. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a diptych. So
Mhm.
yeah. So that kind of work that I'm saying about embedding these imagery into the acrylic really started with my border crossings, which was my master's thesis in 1985.
Mhm.
So this part of the installation was these 8 feet by 2 feet hanging what I call banner paintings. They're singular color and each one represents a specific person. So originally I had, well, I still have like 20 of them. This one, for example, is about the mother of Dominga Isabel. So they come from borders that I crossed, the border between Argentina and Chile, Honduras and Nicaragua, and the US-Mexico border. The Argentine experience I had living in Buenos Aires, 1981, and this is from the women there, the mothers of the Plaza de Mayo. They're very famous now as the grandmothers. The moment I landed in Argentina, they and Perez Esquivel were winning the Nobel Peace Prize. And they just, you know, very important women to know. And we're celebrating Women's History Month. We should know about these women. And my opportunity to march with them actually and understand what they were asking for. They're of course asking for their children who had disappeared during the military rule. But the scarves they wore, they embroidered the names of their disappeared on the scarves. So I took that as a symbol. And the next one is, the green one is Marta. And she is actually a dear friend of mine. And in 82, 83, she was coming over the US-Mexico border, and she was from El Salvador. Her husband had been murdered and she was coming. And at that point, I was working with a project to what we call the sanctuary movement, which was to support refugees that were coming. A lot of them were coming through California to Canada for safety. So recognizing this was 84, 85 that I created these, and to think about, you know, we're still looking at the border and the issues that we have and how we treat our refugees. So I was like, okay, I have to show this. It's in my closet. Let's get it out. Let's recognize that connection, you know, to over 30 years ago. And I just, as an artist, I like, wow, you know, this is still very relevant.
Yeah, Marta's story is, it's so many women's stories.
And then I was able to, when I went to do the theology degree, I made this connection in this series called Face to Face in 1987, where I connected the same stories that I had lived. I mean, I recognize, particularly as a middle-class white woman, you know, I'm telling stories of women from Latin America, and I recognize that, you know, I was connected with them. They were friends or people I worked with. I worked in a women's shelter, basically, in Buenos Aires. And then I was able to travel to work with people in Nicaragua during their revolution. So these were like super impactful experiences. So in this one, I'm connecting those stories to women in the Old Testament. So let's see, the inside of this, they kind of make a circle, and it's like a sacred circle of their stories. The inside of the painting is about the biblical woman, and then the outside is a connection to a Latin American woman's story that I saw as a parallel story.
Right.
And so, for example, Rahab is a woman in the Old Testament who hides people in the city of Jericho and lets them out the window. So I have this window, and it's hard to see there, but there's a rope hanging out of there. And I made that connection to the women in Central America, and particularly in that time period, they would wear a red bandana over their face, and then they'd hold a picture of their children. So I made that like.
So this is a picture of a missing child.
Yes. So the idea that, you know, when we look at stories of women, even as far back as stories that were put into Old Testament of the scriptures, you have these women that show up as doing special things. And we know, a lot of us who've studied the theology recognize that a lot of times women are not really uplifted, but there was at that time in the late 80s, we were looking specifically for the little gems of stories. And for me, that really represents that, some of these things are so tragic, and yet when you find the courage and the stories of the women and the courage that they had, to protect their children, to look for their children, for this person to hide people in the wall. It's just, I think that's where the storytelling needs to come forward, because it helps us to see that even though we have certainly the type of injustice that's happening, there's always this other story about people's resilience. So that's what I'm trying to tell in these stories.
That's wonderful.
And another one was Rachel, and this was a later piece, but it's based on the same investigation. And she was the mother of Joseph, and a lot of people know the story of Joseph's coat of many colors. So I started making coats that were bloodied like the one in the scripture, to symbolize that, Rachel is weeping for her children. And the scarf was that comparison to the women whose children had disappeared.
Right.
And so again, it's not just a negative story, but here we have the Yael, who was a biblical woman, and here's if you can barely see the generals, I embedded the picture of the Argentine generals in there. Having lived myself under that military rule, that's a long story, but this particular story is about her. You see the next one, you see that she actually took.
I was going to ask though, before we moved on, the significance of the grommets. Aren't those called little grommets?
Right. So it's a tent. It's tents. It's symbolizing a tent. But you're right. Yeah. Again, I'm using like fabric that's telling a story, I guess.
Right.
It's in the tent. Yeah. And then this tent stake, this is one of those what we look at, scholars look at as the texts of terror that show things that are like totally crazy, but she put a tent stake through the general's head. So symbolically, it's pretty violent, but it symbolizes for me the bravery of women to fight back and make sure that there is a shift in power, so that people can be healthy and whole. But anyway, that's Yael's story. And so some of these kept going, like later work I did on Ruth. Ruth was a wanderer. She gleaned from the fields, and
this moves into
so footsteps. Yeah, you can keep going. Footsteps is that imagery.
So you're kind of, some of the imagery then you were taking off, and then, or we're moving from the banners and into the canvas.
And then I just I'm throwing in a lot of different things. I didn't throw in the watershed and all different things I did for several years, but to continue with thinking about women's stories, the gallery in San Juan Bautista was dedicated to Our Lady of Guadalupe, and the friends that helped found it with me kind of led me on that journey. So much so that I wrote my dissertation about women's art in Guadalupe. And this is my altar to Guadalupe, reflecting on the shrine at the oak tree in Watsonville,
Mhm.
which is another story that I'm writing about, and that continues. I still visit that place. So I
Mhm.
also visited all the missions in California
Oh my
to look
goodness.
for Guadalupe, and that
Over a
curiosity
certain time period
in
or
all in 2020, 2012.
oh wow.
And that
Good trip.
curiosity really was because in San Juan Bautista, the Teatro Campesino does the wonderful play of the Virgin of Guadalupe. There's a deep connection to Guadalupe, and I just was curious. So again, the reason I call myself artist scholar is, I'm doing this artwork, and then I get into the actual scholarship, and I've been presenting papers, trying to get to really the role of these images of women, and the kind of history that we don't have all the answers to, how people responded to these
Mhm.
images as they came early in California history.
Right.
A lot of us are looking at Guadalupe as a symbol of the mixture of what indigenous faith could continue in Mexico. But
Mhm.
I'm working now on a thesis that it worked differently in California.
Mm.
But you have to read my book when
Well, we'll have to.
it's
But this also reminds me of just your documenting, your the importance that it is for you to document. So you're documenting as a scholar and get
yeah.
to the history and then and
Yeah, and I made a little book about that Guadalupe, and I'm doing other, so trying to put it all together.
Mhm.
So I had to put this in because every year in our gallery we did an altar, and the Guadalupe in this one was created by a friend, and this is honoring the children who died in detention. So
Mm.
just bringing us to the present.
Right. Here's just a close up. Did you want to speak to the it's on my right, the picture on the right? Isn't that of a family member?
Oh, the little sower.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of me. I mean, it's a collage, but
Okay.
it's a collage that I put on the altar, like she's kind of protecting. It's like we have to sew, and I guess as women telling stories, I'm just making her a little saint, that she's
Mm-hmm.
getting things ready, and maybe she's sewing the virgin's robe. I don't know. She's a little tiny painting. I do a lot of little ones
Mm-hmm.
that kind of just give me different ideas, but that's one I've always enjoyed.
Right. And now this was for 2020. This was a new series.
Yeah.
Limited.
So while I was sheltered in place, I couldn't use my studio in Pacific Grove, so I have a little barn in the back my house that I painting against the wall, and started creating these because I knew I wanted to make a connection back to the banner paintings that I had done. And I was trying to figure out um, how to tell a recent story. How is this issue of women, and the resistance, and the things that are happening for women. And I really was drawn to the story of the murdered and missing Indigenous women that is happening in our country and in Canada,
Mhm.
and people don't know about it. And so
Yeah.
the mask ended up, instead of a handprint on its own, I ended up with the mask because the women and the mothers and the people coming out to demand that law enforcement look for these young women are wearing masks.
Mhm.
And this, I think, here I am, 1980, what I saw happening in Argentina, the women that were raped, the women that came into our center that had difficult times with the police or with other men in the community. And then we have the 2020, we have Indigenous women that are disappearing, and more than that, falling in between the cracks because the tribal authorities and the US authorities aren't coordinating. There's, oh, she ran away.
Right.
So it's like wanting to make people aware that's happening today.
Right.
So
And then, like you said, the complication of then being in a pandemic where now they may be wearing masks. So are they, how are they going to be found during this time right now? I think it's really powerful. It's very, and then the connection. I mean, it's just,
yeah.
it's very emotional to see that.
So yeah, just I wanted people to recognize that the mothers of the Plaza de Mayo, and now more grandmothers, are continuing. There's some movies that have come out recently, if you want to know more about them. And there's part of the dynamic is that when their children disappeared, a lot of them were young women, because most of the people that the military took were young people,
Mhm.
20s, 30s, and a lot of them were pregnant, and they actually the military took the children and
Mhm.
adopted them out to military families. So these grandmothers are actually now looking for the grandchildren that were born because their own children were murdered.
Wow.
So it's like, okay, this is a dark day in their history that the women are still struggling to rectify.
Mhm.
And then this is the image of the women making people aware of the murdered, missing Indigenous women, and then trying to find the picture that inspired my piece in the 80s. I put that together, how
Mhm.
you hold the mask, and then so uh yeah.
Yeah.
So go to this the red ones,
Mhm.
they're like, that's basically 40 years apart
Right.
of my artwork. And I think one of the things you were talking about, you have that kind of retrospective, and you end up seeing things. I said, it's not like it was intentional that I said, oh, the masks of 1984 and the mask of 2020 are going to resonate. I didn't even think about that till
Of
everything's
course.
up and I'm sitting there in the exhibit going, wait a minute. So it's
Yeah.
like, it's important, I think, as artists with it, we do look back at what we've done and see where we've progressed. And because my work is paralleling things that are happening in our society, it also
Mhm.
is like, okay, things are in our society are still uh, happening the way that they were in that period.
Yeah. It's unfortunate to say not much has changed.
Yeah.
Not much has changed. So let's
But there's
see.
people resisting, and there's people
Yes.
organizing. So I want that positive message
Mhm.
to continue. I mean, and I think that's why I think when I shared these pieces in the 80s the first time, part of what really happened was, and even these here, people were drawn in because of the beauty. They're very beautiful, but then
Mhm.
there's a really difficult message, but they're able to, through art, they're able to understand that message more because they've let themselves, come in. Same thing happened with the watershed work I did. It was like, oh, guess who came to see the exhibit? The Army Corps of Engineers. And we've been trying for years to tell them this and that about the river. And when they came and saw the artwork, they got it. So I think that's why, art has such a powerful message
Mm-hmm.
that it's going to resonate and draw people into, even if it's a difficult story to be
Another
told.
way of seeing and hearing what's happening.
Yeah.
And there you are.
I am in the exhibit.
There you are. So I think this is the end. I think.
There's one more little story,
There's one
which
more.
is
Oh, this is an important one.
To be positive and
I like this
I
story.
did. It was just it really motivated me. Like, I was the one who was like, are we really having this exhibit? But I did want to have it in 2020 because of this piece, which I call the time capsule for the women of 2020. So this I made in 1993, which meant I had a 3-year-old or a 4-year-old and a 6-year-old little girls. So imagine making this piece to encapsulate the writing of feminist writers.
Right.
And then, like, oh, there's 2 little irises inside that are symbolizing my daughters. And the idea in my head was, well, in 2020, they're going to be in their 30s, like I was at the time. I was in my 30s, so they're going to be in their 30s. Will they even be interested in this writing and this information and what the feminist writers have to say that helps us understand ourselves as women and to move forward? So it had to be in the show because it was a time capsule. I couldn't find it for a while. I was like, where is it? I buried it. Not literally in the dirt, but I found it in time, and it made its way. So
in
it
great condition too.
Yeah,
In really good condition.
it helped me think about, again, like, if we're an artist working now, where are we going in the future? And yeah, and this, I think the next one's about the last one, where I'm learning from what's happening now and from younger women that are organizing, and the Black Lives Matter ended up being the theme here, and the idea of the work we're doing for ecological justice. So the themes keep going, but the role of women in all of that, and how they play a role in resisting and changing systems through their art and
through their voice too.
Yeah, through
their voice. Well, thank you so much for walking us through the 40 years. I think it's I appreciate seeing everything and hearing all the stories, because not everyone was able to see your exhibit in November. So like you said, it connects to it's Women's History, Women's Month. So women's stories are front and center.
Right.
Now.
And you have to document what you're doing, because that way it does live on. But it's a toss up, because the art is in the moment and you feel it. I feel like in person you really feel it. But then online, and I feel like working with my students online now, I can't ask them to go to a real exhibit and see it, because that isn't, we can't do that right now. But that's the dialogue that is like, okay, there is a way that seeing the real art does make a difference in how you experience it. But for now, we have to document and put it there for people to see in different forms.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, what is next for you, Jennifer? What's coming up?
Well, like I said, I've been teaching online, and I've been asked to write a textbook for a publisher for my class. So I'm doing a lot of writing. I'm still working on my different research projects, and eventually have a book on the women's art and Guadalupe. And
Mhm.
the artwork, I really, am, like I said, thinking about uh, more of these banner paintings, because they are something that I brought together as a young artist in grad school, and it was like, well, they're still very powerful. So I think
Mhm.
you get to a point where you I spent a lot of time curating, and working, teaching. You want to do more work. You get to an age where you're like, yeah, I need to do more,
Mhm.
and let the let it come out, and not worry
Right.
too much about where it's going to go next, because I'm sure after the pandemic we'll have more opportunities. We'll be doing open studio in October, the Monterey
Mhm.
folks, and so that will be, our studio should be open,
Right.
and I'll have some new work for that.
Well, wonderful. Wonderful. Well, appreciate everything that you have been creating, and um, there's a lot to reflect on today. So I just appreciate you sharing your story and in your artwork. And I know that we can find you online on Facebook at Jennifer Colby. And then you also have a website, and everything will be put into our Facebook feed. But you're at jennifercolbyphd.weebly.com. And definitely you're very active online. So please, find Jennifer online, and keep following your story and the stories that you're sharing with all of us. So thank you so much for being
Oh,
with us
thank you, Karen.
today on Artist Spotlight. And we will be seeing you soon.
Okay, thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much. So thank you again for joining our monthly Artist Spotlight. And please be sure to share and like today's episode. And to learn more about the Arts Council for Monterey County, please find us online at www.arts4mc.org. Thank you and have a wonderful afternoon.